He's been at this for a long time. I don't have any problem with that. But this is an example of a hastily drawn, poorly drafted amendment that is unenforceable in effect and skews up. So in addition to all the other things we've said about letting the Ag Committee do it, here's a good example of why. And I yield back.
And yields back. Any other member wish to speak in opposition? For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
And the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also rise today because I strongly oppose this amendment. And as I've listened to the debate, I think some folks are missing some fundamental principles of where our nation's food supply comes from. I've seen many members come to the floor to defend funding our nutrition programs, and at the same time, many of those members, which is obviously a worthy cause, but at the same time, many of those members come down here and attempt to pull the rug out from under farmers by scrapping programs that provide an important safety net to our producers. We have to be clear, we can't have a stable food supply for the recipients of nutrition programs and all Americans unless our commodity producers have some stability. Through a deliberate and balanced approach, the Ag Committee's brought reform to the AGI means test by further targeting program benefits to those individuals that depend on farming for their livelihood. By setting the income level at an appropriate level, the committee recognized the production costs and economies of scale that are necessary to be competitive in today's agriculture. An overly restrictive AGI ceiling disregards the financial reality of commercially viable farms. Let's be clear about this. A farmer's AGI is not profit. There are still a number of expenses that must be covered. In addition to personal expenses, farmers must service debt that, given the cost of today's machinery and land, can easily reach into the millions of dollars. At a time when more and more people have to rely on the productivity and stability of American agriculture, now is not the time to pose a threat to the very food source on which they rely. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Any other member wish to speak in opposition to the amendment? For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
And the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I know that $250,000 sounds like a lot of money. It will buy you a third of a new John Deere cotton picker. And from our standpoint as a country, agriculture and manufacturing have been the foundations of our economy. The things that we need to get our economy back on track are access to capital and regulatory certainty. And when you make changes that are this drastic on the floor through an amendment process instead of going through the committee process where it should be done, then you hinder those two things. Farmers lose confidence and their lenders lose confidence in federal policy, and that does away with stability and the predictability that some of these issues are designed to provide. The loans necessary to operate the business may become harder to come by if we start to make amendments like this and allow amendments like this on the floor. I simply rise to say this. Agriculture has been strong. It's been one of the bright spots in America, and it will continue to be one of the bright spots in America because of the work ethic of the people involved in the agricultural industry. I would ask my colleagues to oppose this amendment and allow us to deal with this in the Agriculture Committee, in the Farm Bill that we will be starting over the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields the balance of his time. Any other member wish to speak in opposition? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. And those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
On that, Madam Chair, I'd ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman asks for a recorded vote, and pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Lipinski of Illinois. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to alter contract number GS 35F4076D with respect to the location of data storage.
And the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Order is reserved on the gentleman's amendment, and the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes. Speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I applaud the administration's leadership in looking for ways to save money and simplify our federal IT infrastructure by moving data to storage in cloud computing. But its critical question is, where will this data actually be stored? There's no reason for essential government data to be stored in offshore facilities, and the USDA has recognized that fact. In cloud computing contracts signed by the USDA, Secretary Vilsack and CIO Chris Smith have insisted that all data must be stored in the United States. This amendment seeks to reinforce and codify this USDA contract's terms specifically regarding where the data is stored. That is all that this speaks to. It says that this contract, in regards to where the data is stored, will be codified with this amendment. Now, why is this important? It's critical for security reasons. We shouldn't have to worry about another nation seizing the infrastructure where our data is stored. It's critical for reliability reasons. We don't want another country, either intentionally or accidentally, disconnecting us from the servers we need to run our government. It is critical because building, operating, and safeguarding this infrastructure here in the United States also means more American jobs. So what this amendment seeks to do, as I said, is just look at this one part of the contract, say that this data must be stored here in the United States, that this cannot be changed. And I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. It's budget neutral, supports the efforts of the USDA, and keeps our data secure and accessible, and supports American jobs. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia insists on his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I want to withdraw the point of order. As I read the amendment, it looks like it is in order.
The point of order is withdrawn. Does the gentleman wish to seek time in opposition?
But I oppose the amendment.
Apparently so.
And do so out of caution and move to strike the last word. And what I want to say to my friend who knows a lot about this, and I know is a very careful steward of tax dollars and very deliberate in his legislation in general, I'm not that familiar with the issue, and I am not certain why location is that important, and I'm very reluctant to tie the hands of the USDA in seeking the best contract. I want them to do what a business would do and be free from micromanagement of the U.S. Congress. And if the location is outside of the United States, or the location is in Illinois or in Georgia or California, I want them to do what's best for USDA and the best for the taxpayers. So as I understand this amendment, it would limit that sort of flexibility. So I oppose the amendment, but I want to say to the gentleman from Illinois, I will certainly continue a dialogue with you on this, because I do realize I need to learn more about it, but on that basis I do not want to tie their hands based on location. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks further time? Miss, I have to say, we can be recognized if you ask unanimous consent. Yes? Is there objection?
Yield time.
Gentleman from California. What purpose? Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will yield so much time as gentleman may consume. Gentleman from Illinois.
Illinois is recognized for
Thank
5 minutes.
the ranking member very much for yielding me the time. I know that there was, I thank the chairman for his comments, but I think there's been a little bit of confusion. I just want to clear this up. This speaks specifically to a contract that the USDA has already entered into. And essentially, it is taking out that, just looking at that one piece of that contract that says all data must be stored in the United States, and codifying that to say that that part cannot be changed. And this is one contract. This is not that's already been signed, and it's not speaking to anything else in the future, but I think that it's important that for security, that I think this is a good move that the USDA made. And so I just want to speak to that in this amendment specifically, and it's not in any way tying the hands of the USDA or any other agency in the future. I would hope that the other agencies, USDA and other agencies, follow this lead in the future, because I think it is good for the United States. But it doesn't any further tie the hands of the USDA. I just wanted to clear it up. I yield back to Mr. Farr.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there a further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman.
Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois will be postponed. Who seeks recognition? From Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk labeled as Flake number 4.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Flake of Arizona. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section. None of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this Act may be used to pay the salaries and expenses of personnel to carry out a market access program under Section 203 of the Agricultural Trade Act of 1978, 7 U.S.C. 5623.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chair. Administered by the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, the MAP program uses funds from the Commodity Credit Corporation to aid the development, expansion, and maintenance of foreign markets for U.S. agricultural commodities and products. It does so by forming partnerships with nonprofit trade associations and cooperatives, nonprofit state regional trade groups, small businesses, and others to market our products overseas. You know, in a perfect world, if there's a lot of money hanging around to do something, this might be a good thing to do, to help these small companies market their products overseas. I would argue that's really not the proper role and function of government, but people would argue, you know, when times are good, let's do that. But we're borrowing 40 cents on the dollar. Every dollar that we spend on this kind of thing is borrowed. And we're borrowing money to subsidize companies, small and large, to market their products overseas. A while ago, the New York Times shined some light on this program. They spotlighted the ridiculousness of a fashion show in India put on with taxpayer money in partnership with the cotton industry's Cotton Council International. Here we're subsidizing a fashion show in India in partnership with the Cotton Council International. The article notes that, quote, over the last decade, the program has provided nearly $2 billion in taxpayer money to agricultural trade associations and farmer cooperatives. These promotions are as varied as a manual for pet owners in Japan and a class at a Mexican culinary school to teach aspiring chefs how to cook rice for Mexican customers. Come on. I mean, we're spending money that we're borrowing for this kind of activity. You will hear arguments for every dollar we spend in this, it yields $20 in return income or whatever else. You always hear that when you hear about government spending that people want to protect. But let me say, when we're running debt and deficits like we have today, we shouldn't be running programs like this. We ought to save money where we can. Time magazine also noted here that a lot of the money goes to large farmer-owned cooperatives. It'll be portrayed that it's just helping small businesses, that there have been reforms to make sure that it doesn't go to corporations like McDonald's or whatever else. But this article noted that groups like, or corporations like Sunkist, Welch's, and Blue Diamond, which grows and sells almonds, combined, these three companies had over $2 billion in sales in 2009. Now, these aren't small companies, yet we're subsidizing them. We're subsidizing the promotion of their products overseas. I am glad they're exporting. I hope they continue to export, but they don't need to do it with taxpayer money. I urge adoption of the amendment and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks time in opposition? Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for recognizing me. I claim time in opposition. You know, this is the kind of program that I think Mr. Flake pointed out. Do you wonder why we use taxpayer monies to market American agriculture abroad? And you'd say, well, we don't need to do that. And as he pointed out a couple of great big companies that take advantage of it. But guess what? In this legislation, we carve out so that the small businesses can take advantage of this. And why do we do that? I mean, I don't know how much you see in the advertising that goes on by products from other countries. But remember the Juan Valdez coffee ad, Colombian coffee, wake up and smell the coffee? Guess what? That was subsidized by the Colombian government. It was very, very effective. Coffee prices actually went down, and they lost their ability because it cost them about $40 million a year to do that advertising. What we've created in the United States is a matching program saying you put up your money first, put up the private sector money, and we'll match it, and we carve out and protect it. And I'm just looking, I mean, California has a lot of congressional districts, and you wouldn't think that districts in San Francisco or Los Angeles. We have 53 members of Congress from California. There's only 4 congressional districts in California that don't take advantage of this program. And I would imagine those are in the middle of Los Angeles. Because there are companies in it, and I can go through all of them. They're all, a lot of them are very small. And in my county alone, we have a very, I don't know any, Soyve, for example. Soyve, the sauce, that's a husband and wife company. They take advantage by putting some of their money up, and then they get to advertise. I don't know what countries they choose to advertise in it. And they can't advertise their product per se. They have to advertise the generic of it. So you don't sell sun-kissed oranges. You sell, you should buy more California oranges. So, you know, it's easy program to attack, but when you get down to managing in a global market and world competition, this stuff makes sense. And as long as other countries are going to do it to us to stay competitive, we got to do it to them. I think our way of doing it protects the small producer more than anybody else and allows them to get in. We do this in tourism promotion all the time. We just passed a bill to advertise the United States abroad, and we have the Tourism Promotion Board to do that. So we're going to have to be globally competitive, and this is one of the programs that allows us to be globally competitive. Gentlemen, like to yield? For 1 minute. 1 minute to gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree with Mr. Farr more. The one thing that I think we need to understand that this program enhances is our trade deficit. We have been suffering with the global economy over the years, but the one aspect of the American economy in terms of our trade deficit that has kept us afloat has been agricultural exports. And it's programs like the Market Access Program that has allowed us to maintain a trade balance with our global competitors. And so I would think that this is a program that we ought to carefully protect. It's a program that works, and it's what has kept kept our trade deficit at the level that it is. And if we should take this away, we can look to have more products from China, fewer of our exports going overseas, and fewer of the smaller companies that benefit from this carve-out, being able to utilize the internet marketing and to sell their products overseas. So I would think that this is, again, penny wise, pound foolish, and it should be defeated.
Gentleman from California still controls the time.
Yield back my remainder. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
And let me ever so briefly say that I oppose the amendment. It once again is the process of cutting funding for the Market Access Program. in effect legislating foreign policy through the appropriations process. This is not appropriate on the regular order. It should not be occurring. We will consider this along with other programs in the 2012 Farm Bill. And let me note, I agree with my colleagues. Over the last 25 years, MAP has boosted agricultural exports. It has increased American jobs. It has added to rural income. And I know we have a lot of discussion these days on creation of jobs, and rightly so, but exports are one of the most surefire ways to increase American jobs. In fact, for every $1 billion in exports, approximately 8,400 jobs are created here at home. And in 2010, agricultural exports alone supported nearly 1 million American jobs. Please oppose the amendment. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
On that, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman asks for a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona will be postponed. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I would have offered an amendment to actually control the cormorants, which are an invasive species that affects the catfish farmers. And I understand that due to technical reasons I can't, but I was hoping that the chairman would allow me to engage in a colloquy regarding it.
Well, the gentleman from Georgia.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chairman. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, APHIS as it's known, is an agency within the USDA which plays a critical role in helping farmers handle losses as a result of wolves, coyotes, birds, and other invasive species. This agency is especially important to our catfish farmers because it helps to protect and control the livestock from cormorants, which are birds that prey upon catfish. And in the South, especially in Alabama, the southern catfish production has seen phenomenal growth over the last 30 years. The continued growth of the catfish industry has really been limited by the growth of these cormorants and other invasive species that really feed upon the livestock. The state of Alabama has roughly 22,000 water acres of fish farms, which are nearly 200 commercial farmers produce 25 different species, most of which are catfish. And Alabama farmers are quite concerned that in the committee report, it looked as if the control of these invasive species would be limited only to the southeast. I don't think that that was the original intent of the committee report, and really wanted to know from really was hoping that the chairman would address that issue and just clarify, if you would, whether or not the cormorants would only be limited funding for those invasions.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding, and also to bring up the fact that the cormorants are a problem all over the country, and certainly as one from Georgia, I know exactly that you in Alabama are having the problems that they have in the Northeast and in Mississippi and all the other places. So I will absolutely work with the gentlewoman from Alabama to make sure that the USDA is addressing your cormorant problems, and I'll work with the ranking member from California to make sure that it does not get forgotten. But I also appreciate your diligence on the cormorant issue, and realizing that the report is a little bit misleading as we have written it. I think you've underscored a very something that we all are behind you on, so we will work with you on it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Lady yields back.
I'd like to yield some time to Ranking Member Peterson, if you would.
Well, the gentlelady reclaims her time and yields to the gentleman from Minnesota.
Thanks, gentlelady. I'm sorry I was out of the chamber, but so I understand that you're trying to get the cormorant animal damage stuff extended to other parts of the country.
To make sure that it's the clarification of the language.
And that's a very important thing. This is getting to be a bigger and bigger problem.
Yes,
we've had the problem in the Midwest. They've had the problem in the Northeast. but there's a lot of problems I know in Alabama and Mississippi and some of those states as well because these birds migrate. As I said earlier, the reason we got into this problem is because we entered into this migratory bird treaty with Mexico and Canada back in 1973. And in Mexico, black birds are sacred as part of their culture down there. And so there's a prohibition in that treaty against any hunting of any black birds, whether it be crows or cormorants or whatever it is. And so that has tied our hands in terms of trying to deal with these issues, and we've been able to make changes on kind of a pilot basis in certain areas, but we need to do this all over the country because these birds migrate. They go all the way from Canada down to Mexico and back and forth, and they cause a lot of damage to fish farms. They do in my part of the world. It's sport fishing lakes. A cormorant will eat 3 times its weight in fish a day, and they do tremendous damage when they get in there. So I support the gentlelady and hope we can extend this program around the country. I yield back.
Thank you. I yield back the rest of my time.
Gentlelady from Alabama yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word and make a motion real quickly. I just want to thank the ranking member for working with us on this bill. I want to thank all the minority and the majority staff for all their fine work. We would not be here today without them. At their request, and because the hour is late and members are eager to vote on this bill, I will submit their names of all the hard-working people who made this thing happen, but I wanted to say thank you on behalf of both of us, and I yield to my friend 30 seconds, or the staff will mutiny if we actually thank them for something publicly.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know we've been here almost 25 hours of debate. I appreciate the open rule and the fact that we've had a huge debate, and I'd personally like to thank you and all the staff. And I wore my Father's Day tie for you because I know your children are in town and you've been spending a lot of time here on the floor, and I'd like to wish you a happy Father's Day.
Well, same to you, and I wore my organic cotton tie on your behalf. So, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise and report the bill back to the House with sundry amendments, and with the recommendation that the amendments be agreed to and the bill be passed as amended. Do pass. Too early.
Ask the gentleman to withdraw that amendment for a moment.
Yes.
The gentleman withdraws the motion. Thank you.
Yes.
Recommend perhaps to the gentleman from Georgia that he actually reads the names. 1 minute.
You have to save it.
The chairman recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Say I withdraw my motion. Yeah. Well, you did. You withdrew.
Okay.
Yeah, he's trying to get him to...
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on the amendments on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. An amendment by Ms. Pingree of Maine. Amendment number 2 by Ms. Fox of North Carolina. Amendment 25 by Mr. Kind of Wisconsin. Amendment by Mr. Dingell of Michigan. An amendment by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. Amendment number 23 by Mr. Gibson of New York. An amendment by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon. Amendment number 1 by Mr. King of Iowa. Amendment number 2 by Mr. King of Iowa. Amendment number 22 by Mr. Garrett of New Jersey. Amendment number 29 by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. An amendment by Mr. Scalise of Louisiana. Amendment number 28 by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. An amendment by Ms. Harino of Hawaii. Amendment number 38 by Mr. Holden of Pennsylvania. An amendment by Mr. Campbell of California. An amendment by Ms. Blackburn of Tennessee. An amendment by Mr. Flake. Amendment number 1 by Mr. Flake of Arizona. Amendment number 2 by Mr. Flake of Arizona. Amendment by Ms. Lipinski of Illinois. And amendment number 3 by Mr. Flake of Arizona. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. I will clarify that the second amendment is amendment number 1 by Ms. Fox of North Carolina, not amendment number 2. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Maine, Ms. Pingree, on which the further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Pingree of Maine.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered, and members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House holding the first series of votes for the day on appropriations for the Agriculture Department, Rural Development, and the Food and Drug Administration. It amounts to about $17.25 billion, and it's 23% below the President's request. It's about 11% below current funding, and it reduces domestic nutrition programs and international food aid. I understand up to 24 votes could happen on agriculture programs. And along with a vote on final passage, we don't have an exact time on when that might happen, but we are expecting that to happen today. While this vote is underway, a number of news sources reporting that New York Congressman Anthony Weiner will hold a press conference this afternoon at 2 Eastern to announce his resignation. During her weekly news briefing this morning, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi would not confirm a resignation, but she did acknowledge that Congressman Weiner would be holding that briefing this afternoon to make an announcement. As voting continues, we'll hear remarks from House leadership during their weekly briefing.
Morning, everyone. Job creation has been the focus of our new majority from the beginning. Started with our Pledge to America, and now we've built on that pledge with our plan for America's job creators. You can check all the details at jobs.gop.gov. Our plan is designed to promote private sector growth, the kind of growth that the stimulus promised but failed to deliver. In fact, it turns out that federal regulators have been hiring at a rate of more than 3 times that of the private sector. So taxpayers are footing the bills for more bureaucrats while small businesses are afraid to hire. Washington Democrats say they own the economy, and this is what their economy looks like. We invited the President to work with us on jobs, but instead he downplayed the 9.1% unemployment as bumps on the road and laughed off the stimulus failure. Now here we are on the anniversary of his administration's recovery summer, started a year ago, and Americans are still asking the question, where are the jobs? The American people deserve some answers, but when it comes to this administration, it's clear that they don't have many. You've heard me say this before. It's time to get serious. And I hope the President will change course, listen to the American people, and work with us to help enact real job creation ideas and to get this administration from continuing to block their recovery with all of their regulations and calls for higher taxes.
Good morning. Yesterday, the head of the Democrat National Committee said that their party owns the economy. And she expressed some frustration as to questioning why businesses didn't embrace their agenda. I think that shows you how out of touch they are. The reality is most people in this country are employed by small businesses. And what small businesses see is a myriad of overregulation, of unfunded, of unfair taxes, and of mandates, new mandates that keep coming down the pike. Again, where is the realization that we've got to create an environment where small business people and entrepreneurs are going to take some risks? You know, economic growth is not a government program. It is high time that this administration realize they should join us. We put together a plan for America's job creators. Central to that notion is we've got to empower entrepreneurs, people who are willing to open new businesses, people who are willing to commit their capital to grow jobs, grow value. And that's how we're going to get this recovery going again, not through insistence by here in Washington that we know how to grow this economy. Thank you.
Good morning. The President a year ago said it was the summer of recovery. We're now 28 straight months with unemployment above 8%. Yesterday, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz said they own the economy. And what are the facts of owning the economy? Since the stimulus, 1.9 million Americans have lost their job. Since the President's taken office, gasoline prices are up more than 100%. Health insurance premiums up more than 19%. food stamp recipients, up more than 39%. The only two major factors to go down are our home values and startups. And the difficulty is when you look forward to the future, what does it say? Startups in the last 12 months are at its lowest point in a decade. I want to stress that, the lowest point in a decade. If you take the end of the last recession from 2001 to 2007, small business, those with 500 employees or less, created more than 7 million jobs. Those with 500 or more actually decreased in jobs. There's a fundamental difference between an entrepreneur and a government job. An entrepreneur does not take a job from anyone. They create jobs. Well, this environment, these democratic policies, have crushed it to a new low. That's why the Republicans have a plan to unshackle America, reform the regulation, create a tax atmosphere that actually allows you to compete with the rest of the world, and invest in American jobs and American energy. There has to be a fundamental change here. And we challenge the Senate to take our bills up as we move them off the floor, because America can no longer wait.
As Kevin said, this is the one-year anniversary of the President's Summer of Recovery. Another summer, no recovery. 9.1% unemployment, 28 months of unemployment above 8%, and Americans are asking, Mr. President, where are the jobs? The Bureau of Labor Statistics recently announced that it now takes, on average, 10 months to find a job if you're unemployed. This is the longest in recorded history, and Americans are asking, Mr. President, where are the jobs? Business starts, entrepreneurship, at a 17-year low, and Americans are asking, Mr. President, where are the jobs? 1 in 7 on food stamps, and Americans are asking, Mr. President, where are the jobs? And with all due respect to the President, a $1.1 trillion stimulus program, the latest studies showing that it either killed off or forestalled 500,000 jobs, Mr. President, that's no laughing matter. It's no laughing matter to the people who remain unemployed in the 5th District of Texas that I represent. And this is why Republicans have announced a plan for America's job creators that has everything to do with making our tax code fairer, flatter, simpler, more competitive. It has everything to do with putting America on a fiscally sustainable trajectory to give confidence to our employers to create jobs. It has everything to do with eliminating or modifying regulations whose benefits do not exceed the cost of jobs in America. It has everything to do with making the cost of energy reasonable to our job creators and our families. And if the Senate would take it up, and if the President would get out of the way, we would actually have a summer of recovery.
The question that has to be asked and the question that has to be answered is, where's the White House's credibility as it comes to economic growth? Remember, this is a White House that promised that unemployment would peak declaratively at 8% if only the stimulus bill was passed, and that was 28 months ago. And since then, we've had nothing but 28 months of underperformance and ultimately failure. This is the White House that said last summer that this was going to be the summer of recovery. And after the summer of recovery and subsequent action, what do we have? 9.1% unemployment, lagging and nagging. And the White House seems to think that this is somehow a punchline, that this is something to be laughed off and shrugged about. I think it is increasingly clear to most Americans that they look at this administration as absolutely an obstacle to job creation. And so the question that I would pose, and I think most House Republicans pose, is when is it going to be that the White House will recognize that it is their policies that have to change in order for us to move forward?
Good morning. My name is Reed Ribble. I'm from Wisconsin's 8th District. Back in January, Representative Ridgel from Virginia and I started a caucus of job creators, men and women in this Congress that have created jobs and owned our own businesses. I owned a commercial roofing company in Wisconsin for the last 35 years. And as we began to talk, what types of policies could we put together to actually begin the process of helping our economy grow? We came to a common conclusion. And the common conclusion is this, that government must get out of the way. That some new program, some new stimulus, some big government idea is not going to solve the problem. We need to begin to remove the obstacles. And 2 weeks ago, we have provided for the American people a plan that will begin to do that. It will begin to remove the obstacles that this government has put in the way of job creation. It will address regulatory reform, tax reform, permitting, and patent reform. We'll begin to do the things that have put obstacles in the way of job creators. And that is exactly what the summer of recovery didn't do, but needs to be done now. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Scott Ridgell, and families in the 2nd District and really across this great land are reeling from the effects of unemployment. And recently the President said this about the jobs report. He said, people in the markets are still skittish and nervous, and so they pull back because they're still thinking about the traumas of just 2.5 years ago. Well, you know, as an entrepreneur, as a person who knows the great joy of being able to look someone in the eye and saying, you're hired, I know that America's small business owners, they're not looking to the past. By our very nature, we want to look to the future. We want to be optimistic. We want to invest. And yet, what we see are so many obstacles. And I want to speak directly to our job creators this morning. Here's what you're faced with because of the administration's policies. Would you like to create green jobs off the coast of Virginia with a wind farm? Well, be patient, because it's going to take you about 7 years to get a permit. Would you like to get HUD assistance on a new construction project? Well, be patient, because it's going to take about a year for you to get an initial review of your application. And do you wonder why your local banker isn't coming by to make a house call and say, how's your business doing? How can I help you? Can I loan you some money? They're not coming out because they are back there trying to grasp the enormity of Dodd-Frank and the implications of that, the regulations that are still coming out, and they're out there hiring regulatory analysts. This is not in dispute. And to all of our job creators, I want to look you right in the eye and tell you, we're fighting for you. We know what you're up against firsthand. These good men and women behind me and so many of us who were sent to Congress as first-time elected officials, we get it. The American people get it. We ask the President to stand with us and get our country back on track, creating jobs. Thank you.
I have the privilege of representing New York's District 19, and for 16 years in that district, I had the great privilege of caring for patients as an ophthalmologist. And one of the ways in which American medicine has distinguished itself over the decades is that we have been key to medical innovation. We have been the greatest innovators in the world with new pharmaceuticals and devices. And just recently, some of our device manufacturers have come to me and said, you know, we can't afford to do what we have been doing in this country. We are going to have to move our research and development overseas, where regulations are less oppressive, where we won't be taxed for creating and providing to our patients who need them new devices and new innovations. In January, the House of Representatives passed repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which included a tax on our medical innovators. Unfortunately, the Senate did not follow suit. So we have a problem in this country. And closer to home, we have a problem among our small businesses, as we all know. In District 19, I had the privilege of visiting PDJ, which manufactures trusses for various types of construction projects. And they're in Chester, New York. And Mr. Ketchum of PDJ said, you know, Nan, even with all the burdens that have been placed on us by these new laws and regulations over the past couple of years, we're really ready to go. We need customers. We need an economy that works. And our employees are ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work. And what I want to assure Mr. Ketchum and all of his employees is that we in the House Republican Conference are also rolling up our sleeves, and we're getting to work to relieve those burdens and make sure that they have the jobs and opportunity that they deserve and that they are ready to run with.
Good morning. My name is Bill Flores. I'm from the 17th District in Texas. I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning. All too often when we talk about job creation, it sometimes gets a little abstract. So what I want to do this morning is talk about two things. One is a real-world first-hand example, and then secondly, let's talk about some parallels in history that should guide us and that the administration and the Democratic leadership of the Congress should be thinking about. Number one, in terms of the first-hand real-world experience. In 2005, 4 individuals and I got together, and we decided to create a new oil and gas company. And we started with a clean sheet of paper. We built a business plan, and within a few months, we had raised the appropriate capital we needed. Within 10 months, we had made an acquisition over $100 million. By 2008, we had a $6 million payroll and revenues of more than $100 million. If you asked the 5 of us to sit down today and make a decision to do that again, the decision would be different. We wouldn't. Now, why? EPA, offshore drilling moratoria, Dodd-Frank, Obamacare, OSHA, you name the set of initials or the law, and you'll get a clear answer as to why. It's because those agencies and those laws create uncertainty, and they reflect hostility toward business, toward job creators in this country. Now, one of the things that would be interesting is, what does history tell us? If you go back and look at the Great Depression, we had 2 dips in that recession, that depression. One in the early part of the Depression, and then we had another one in 1937 and 1938 that could have been avoided. Now, what happened that caused that second dip? Federal debt grew by 150% between 1929 and 1938. What's happened here between 2006 and today? 150% increase in debt. Federal spending grew 77% between 1932 and 1934. What happened between 2008 and 2010? Federal spending grew by more than that. Tax rates increased by from 24% to 79%, and federal revenues fell by half. We just went through one uncertainty about tax rates 6 months ago. Fortunately, we kept them low. 18 months from now, we've got the same old debate again. You look forward and you don't know what your tax rates are going to be as a business person. And then there was great hostility. The Roosevelt administration issued more pages of regulation and more executive orders than all the other presidents following that administration all the way through Bill Clinton combined. And this sums it up. The Secretary of the Treasury, in April of 1939, Henry Morgenthau, said it this way. He summarized the policy failure to the House Ways and Means Committee and said, now, gentlemen, we have tried spending money. We are spending more than we've ever spent before, and it does not work. I say that after 8 years of this administration, we have just as much unemployment as when we started and an enormous debt to boot. The solution, stop the spending, stop the deficits, get the government out of the way of America's job creators. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Congressman Anthony Weiner informed you of his intention to resign from Congress.
No.
Are you aware that he might resign from Congress, sir?
No.
Speaker Boehner, he's telling friends that he's planning to resign today. What's your reaction?
When I become aware of that, I'll let you know about it.
But what impact do you think this episode has had on the House?
It's just been a distraction. The American people are asking where are the jobs. They want us to focus on job creation. And this was just a distraction that was unnecessary.
Can you talk about your concerns, and after you went through some of the negative documents last night that the administration provided in regard to Libya, where do you think they answered your questions and where they didn't answer your questions?
Well, the administration gave its opinion on the war powers resolution, but didn't answer the question in my letter as whether the Office of Legal Counsel agrees with them. And so I'm looking forward to an answer on this by tomorrow. You know, the White House says there are no hostilities taking place. Yet we've got drone attacks underway. We're spending $10 million a day. We're part of an effort to drop bombs on Gaddafi's compounds. I don't know. It doesn't pass a straight face test, in my view, that we're not in the midst of hostilities. Listen, it's been 4 weeks since the President has talked to the American people about this mission. And I think it's time for the President to outline to the American people why we are there, what the mission is, and what our goals are, and how do we exit this.
Mr. Speaker, Chad raised the question of what you thought, but the question is, what are you prepared to do if you do not like what you read and you don't get the satisfaction that you have asked for from the White House?
The House has options. We're looking at those options, and my guess is that next week we may be prepared to move on those options.
Mr. Speaker,
based on the answers to the questions that we get.
I'm sorry. One of the things that the White House seems willing to consider is extending this 2% payroll tax holiday. Do you think that that policy has helped the economy measurably, and what is your view as to whether it should be extended?
Well, there are a lot of options that are out there. I've heard of this one. I'm not really prepared to give you an answer as to whether it ought to be continued or not.
To what extent, I'd like to follow on that, sir. To what extent do you think the old medicine, and as you know well, the bipartisan stimulus tax cut, whether it's the payroll tax, to what extent does that still work? Or is it your tax strategy to wait for a tax overhaul?
Well, most changes in the tax area, I believe, ought to be part of our changes to lower the corporate tax rate and the individual tax rate and flatten the tax code. But to the other part of your question, the uncertainty that's out there is not going to be overcome by, another little short-term gimmick. The policies coming out of this administration are causing great uncertainty. And look at every regulatory body in this town is going after the private sector as if there's no tomorrow. We need to stop the regulations to provide more certainty for America's job creators.
Speaker.
Yes, ma'am.
Haven't you tried to cut the purse strings for Libya before? That seems to be the only option the House has. What else could you do next week?
Well, there are a number of options I think that we are looking at. But the ultimate option is the House, in fact, the Congress has the power of the purse. And certainly that is an option as well. Thank you all.
Votes on 21 amendments to appropriations for the Agriculture Department, Rural Development, and the Food and Drug Administration bill. After amendment voting, we are expecting votes on a procedural motion and final passage. The last vote of the day should be a vote on the journal, so a total of 24 votes in this series. Following this 15-minute vote, the remaining amendment votes will be 2 minutes. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi held her weekly briefing today, and among other things, she discussed the possible resignation of New York Congressman Anthony Weiner. He is scheduled to hold a news conference this afternoon, and speculation from sources is that he will resign.
Mr. Culberson.
He's an off-eye on no.
Off-eye on no for Mr. Culberson.
On this vote, the yeas are 170, the noes are 238, 0 present. The motion is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 1 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, on which the further proceedings were postponed and which the nays prevail by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1 printed in the congressional record offered by Ms. Fox of North Carolina.
Recorded vote was requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
So 2-minute voting is underway. Members now voting on the Fox Amendment, which prohibits the use of funds to support any Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative. That's supporting local farms. It's an initiative by the Department of Agriculture. Again, this is a series of 2 minutes votes.
seconds remaining in this vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change?
Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes no. Mr. Ryan of Ohio. Mr. Ryan of Ohio votes no. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Bilirakis votes no. Mr. McCarthy of California. Mr. McCarthy of California votes aye. Mr. Rowe of Tennessee. Mr. Rowe votes no. Mr. Rowe of Tennessee votes no. Mr. Fatah. Mr. Fatah votes no.
On this vote, the ayes are 212, the nays are 201, 0 present. The amendment is adopted. The chair will remind members these are 2-minute votes in this long series. The unfinished business, the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 25 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Kind, in which the further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 25, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Kind of Wisconsin.
Recorded vote was requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having been risen. Recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. 2-minute vote. It's a 2-minute vote.
Votes now on the Kind Amendment. Kind of Wisconsin prohibits the use of funds made available for this act to be used for payments to the Brazil Cotton Institute. Again, 2-minute voting underway in the House.
The ayes are 223, the nays are 197, 0 present. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Dingell, on which further proceedings were postponed and in which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Dingell of Michigan.